What's the worst I hate to break it to you moment you had with someone? Story 1, I had a guy working for me that was extremely nice, easy to get along with, and wildly inept. Not even like low effort, but just not capable of learning seemingly basic tasks. We tried everything. Coaching, giving him legitimate checklist instructions, having a team lead sit with him for a couple weeks to walk him through basics, everything. Everyone said the same thing. He just couldn't do the job. Everything he did had to be double-checked by somebody else, which meant that we might as well have somebody else do it. But everyone liked the guy. They thought he was easygoing and cool to be around. Everything. But still, he just straight up couldn't do that job. So I had to find another place for him in the company that would better match his skills. The option would be for him to either take the lower job with lower pay, or he would be fired, with severance. I was not looking forward to the conversation. I called him in for a one to break it to him, and the first thing he started with was, "Hey boss, before we start, I just want to tell you that I really feel like I've been doing a great job here, and I would like to talk about a raise." Yeah, that conversation was not a fun one. Story 2. 15 years ago, my friend's father sadly passed away shortly after we graduated college. It was devastating for him. He figured he'd at least get a nice money boost to help him get back on his feet, but unfortunately, his father kept it a secret that he was deep in debt and had no liquid cash to his name. My friend had no support and fell into a terrible depression. He was broke, he couch crashed with me and our friends for a while. He quit his job and he got comfortable with this new lifestyle. 2 years later, he's still spending a month here and there with various friends around the city, eating their food, occupying their couch, sipping off their booze cabinet, using the terrible, tragic passing of his father as his reasoning for being the way he was. It had been 2 years. We understood the pain he felt was real, but it was really time for him to actually get back on his feet and take care of himself. We didn't know how to explain it to him, but we all felt he was taking advantage of us and was using his father's death as an excuse to just not get a job. I found him a job, a nice one he would be good at, he went to school for, and didn't need prior work experience. I talked to a team lead and an HR rep and got him a contact line for them, basically assuring an interview and a job offer if he arrived on time and sober. Weeks later, my HR rep and this team lead were confused, thinking I didn't relay the information to him. He never called. I gave him a layup of a job opportunity and he just ignored it outright. I called him out on it, but he told me to calm down and chill out, and that I wasn't being sensitive to his depression, and I wasn't understanding his needs. So my worst, I hate to break it to you moment, wasn't actually with him. It was with all my friends afterward. I had to tell them all to turn him down every time he asked to stay a week at their place. It sucked. The timing and my response to his refusal would give it away. This guy knew I was the horrible jerk who turned all his friends against him and denied him free room and board. Hell, I was probably going to be the sole reason he'd blame for his inevitable descent into homelessness. I accepted the burden and called them up, explaining I had a job lined up for him and he refused, and we must all stop giving him a free place to stay if he won't take an easy job. Yes, it sucks that his dad died, and it sucks he didn't get any kind of inheritance to start his life proper. It sucks. He felt this terrible depression that lingered for years, and most of all, it sucks he had a group of enabling friends like me who humored it for so long it just became his accepted norm. We failed him. He didn't end up homeless though. Without us offering his jobless butt a couch to crash on anymore, he ended up moving in with his aunt. Apparently she didn't take his excuses, didn't put up with his laziness, and did all the things we should have been doing all along. No booze allowed, no weed, no gaming after she went to bed. She only had one TV in the house, and it was for Food Network only. He got a job developing 3D assets for VR titles, and started moving up and up creating VR experiences for architecture companies. Dude still hates me probably, and I'll admit I made mistakes to justify it, but I'm really grateful his aunt was there. I did what I needed to do, but it would have been even 10 times worse if he did end up living on the streets, still blaming his father's sudden death for his 2-decade-long predicament. Story 3. There was a rule at my job where only one of these 2 supervisors could be off at a time. One of them loved to take a full week off work during holidays to get more bang for his PTO buck. One year, he had Thanksgiving week off, but the other supervisor had family come to town that week on late notice. The other supervisor asked him to cancel just one of his days so she could spend the day with family. He declined even after she basically begged him, and he even said he didn't have anything to do that day. She then proceeded to take PTO days every Wednesday of a holiday week for the next calendar year, effectively blocking him from taking his cheap weeks off. He told me that he thought it was funny because he knew she didn't have enough time to take all those vacation days off, and she'd eventually have to cancel some of them. I got to tell him, I hate to break it to you, but she only took 2 hours off each of those days. See, the rule didn't differentiate between a partial or whole day, so she only had to burn 24 or so hours to block him. He looked devastated. It was kind of petty on both of their parts, but I give her credit for being creative in her retribution and don't blame her a bit for what she did. Story 4. Having to tell a student who was almost totally blind that she likely couldn't be an ER nurse. She and her dad moved to our district, and at the IEP, her dad starts talking about how he can't wait for Sue to go to nursing school. I frantically scanned my brain trying to think of how someone who was going to need Braille would be able to do that job. Then Sue piped up to say that her dream was to be an ER nurse. Her prior district told her she could do anything, including this. She had a degenerative disease that would eventually make her blind. I talked to my friends who are nurses, I talked to our career lady at the school, I researched, but there just wasn't any way someone who couldn't see could be an ER nurse. I reconvened the IEP and had to explain this. I know both were in denial, but I was not happy that the prior district pumped up this idea. I mean, sure, there are lots she could still do, but that just wasn't one of them. Then another student came from the same district with the idea she could be a CSI investigator. She was also nearly blind. Story 5. Not me, but my ex, a couple years ago got a job as a cook working at a big hospital. They had a mostly set and recurring cycle of dishes, items in Golden Corral style stations around the cafeteria, basic bitch food dressed up or pre-prepped, nothing too fancy. His first month he became familiar with some of the residents, doctors who would make small talk and shoot the shit with him as he loaded up their plates. One of these doctors was a man originally from India who was very enthusiastic about the country fried chicken smothered in pepper gravy. He said it was his favorite dish out of anything else there, and it wasn't uncommon for him to stop by at the end of his shift to purchase extra to take home. My partner's first time working the entree station, the doctor pointed and asked my partner for his usual country fried chicken. My partner stared at him confused. They didn't serve country fried chicken, but they do have chicken fried steak. When he nonchalantly informed the doctor of this, the man's eyes went wide. He looked genuinely shocked. This isn't chicken? My partner described the expression on his face as going from jarred and baffled to so sad when he realized he had been eating beef this entire time, but also that it tasted so delicious. Apparently, despite eating other types of meat, the man was still deeply tied to his Hindu roots and avoided beef in his regular diet because of this. The previous cook before him had mistaken these ambiguous meat patties, smothered in thick gravy, for chicken, so wires got crossed, and he then relayed that incorrect information to the doctor. I still cringe when I think about this. X felt so sad he had to be the one to tell him. Story 6. My dad has been a musician since the 70s. He's incredibly talented, can play multiple instruments, and has written many songs that honestly would sound at home on the radio. About a year or so ago, some scam artist told him they loved his work and wanted to represent him and get his music out there to make money. They just needed a small upfront fee. My poor dad was so happy too. He had wanted this for literal decades. I think that's what clouded his judgment at the time. And yeah, the moment he told me, loud alarms went off in my head. I researched these people online and found an ocean of comments saying they all got scammed. I wanted my dad to be happy, but I couldn't let him be scammed, so I told him. He accepted it, kind of brushed it off, but it was that, yeah, I should have known this would happen kind of response. Really depressing to see him so happy, just to be let down. I know to you and me this would have been an obvious scam, but my dad is from a different time and has no idea about computers or online culture. Fuck scammers. Story 7. I had an employee who was a strict vegetarian for religious reasons. One day we were discussing the employee salad bar and he mentioned how much he loved the Caesar dressing packets they offered. I was surprised and stupidly blurted out, "Oh, I didn't realize you ate fish." He responded that he was vegetarian and gave me a quizzical look. I had to explain that the salad dressing contained both fish and Parmesan cheese, which is almost always cultured with animal rennet. He didn't believe me and the next day insisted on reading the ingredients on one of the packets to me to prove to me that I was wrong. Then he got to the anchovies and got quiet. I still feel awful that he had to find out that way. Neither of us handled the situation well. Story 8. Sister's a victim of her own impulsivity. She really likes new cars and will roll negative equity into a new car. Then she'll get bored of it, stop maintaining it, trade it in for a loss, and have an even bigger loan. And this was back when loans were pretty much free, and they could finance anybody. So she called me up all excited because she found a new truck, got approved for financing, and was on the way to go buy it. So I went to meet her there, a big V8 full-size pickup truck, for a woman working part-time and living in a congested city. Why do you want this? My kids need a place to transport their bikes, and I want to go camping. So I test drove it with her. The salesman was doing everything in his power to make the sale, and fair enough, he's not a financial advisor, he doesn't need to deal with the fallout. But right there in the showroom, I had to tell her that, look, this is an awful idea, you can't afford this, it's going to be a huge burden on you, and you need to walk away. Thankfully, she did. Salesman would have punched me if he could have gotten away with it. He was seething mad. Story 9. I had been working on a project for about 10 months. It was finally done. I got to present it to my department's leadership. They loved it. I did a great job. They wanted to let it flow. I ended up presenting to the president of the company. A highlight in my early career for sure. I went and did the presentation. All 5 people in the chain of command between me and the president were there, along with a lot of the other senior leadership in the company. The president seemed pleased with the presentation. I thought it was great. We were apparently the last thing in the meeting, so everyone was dismissed. Then he asked me, my boss's boss, and our senior director to stay behind. He told us we did some great work on this, but to not continue any work, there was going to be a strategic shift and this project would not be finished. Kinda stung, almost a year of my labor, a total waste. Maybe unsurprisingly, about a month later, there were layoffs. I took the buyout. I wasn't feeling super secure in my position anymore. Story 10, I was at a tech entrepreneurial meetup back in 2012. I spoke with one guy who was enthusiastically describing his billion-dollar idea, an app that people at the gym could use to track their workouts and do challenges. He said there was even a social media potential because people could share their progress. You mean like Strava? I asked, thinking he had perhaps identified a niche market not covered by Strava, Endomondo, and others. I got confused. What? In response. He'd never heard of it. The look on his face when I showed him the app and he saw that his idea had been thoroughly realized for some time was tragic. How he had gotten as far with his idea as he had without finding any existing apps is a mystery to me. Story 11. I lived with roommates and we got a new sublet of some guy they all knew. The guy's girlfriend of 5 years wanted to take a break. Everybody in the house said she had clearly wanted to dump him for a while. The guy moved in and I became friends with him. He definitely thought they were getting back together, but he got depressed and drank a lot. One night, he tells the housemates and I that he cheated on her a few times and even slept with his ex-GF on and off the first year they dated. Yikes. She, his new ex, was an absolute bombshell. Could have easily been a model. The kind of face you could just stare at, unreal looking, but she was a total little princess. Real self-centered type, but a lot of fun to party with. She still hung around with the overall group of friends and my roommates. One night, everybody was drinking together when her ex wasn't around. Somebody brought up cheating and she started laughing. Someone was curious why she found it funny. Her. It's just not something I have to worry about. I'm too attractive. Nobody would cheat on me. Story 12. About a decade ago, I was having dinner with friends and we were all sharing crazy partying stories. One friend said that a few weeks before that, she witnessed a drunk girl chasing her crush around, frantically trying to kiss him or grope him. The poor guy kept telling her to stop, but she wouldn't have it. Some of the drunk girl's friends even joined in. They tried to undress the guy and would not let him leave. Eventually, the guy managed to escape and ran back to his car. My friend was telling that story as if we were supposed to laugh, but at one point, we gently broke it down to her that she had witnessed attempted rape and the fact that the victim was a man was not an excuse. My friend's face changed as the horror of what she had seen dawned on her. Story 13. Daughter of my mom's closest friend. When she floated the idea of owning a dog, I told her that since she has a dog allergy, she should not get any dogs. She proceeded to ignore the advice and get 3 dogs just because they are cute. One of them loves to climb into her bed every night. After 3 years of complaining about headache, fatigue, constant runny nose and skin problems, I finally have a I hate to break it to you moment with her, and she finally believed me and decided to give the dogs to her maid. It was a longer story than that, She first tested it by banishing that dog from her bedroom, then eventually restricting them to just the ground floor, and her symptoms keep improving after each attempt. Her symptoms vanished within 3 months. Story 14. I lived in a shared flat in 2012. Me, another woman, and a guy. I came home from work at about 6 p.m. and heard an unmistakable sound coming from the guy's bedroom. No matter how much I convinced myself it could be something else, I knew it was the sound of spanking coming from his room. I'm pretty liberal, but it feels uncomfortable listening to that when you just want to unwind from work and have your dinner. My female flatmate was very conservative and came to me saying she'd regularly heard the spanking, it was freaking her out, and I needed to deal with it. Why should I deal with it? Deal with it. I cornered a spanky man flatmate in the kitchen and I said boldly, "This is rather awkward, but I need to talk to you about the loud spanking in your bedroom." He replied with the immortal line, "Oh, well, it's not what you think it is. I'm not spanking women there. They're spanking me." "Oh, that's okay then, right? Sorry to have bothered you." Story 15. I remember one time me and a white friend were talking about a girl that went to our high school. This was back in freshman year. We were talking about how much this friend changed, and out of nowhere she says, "Yeah, she's been hanging around too many black people." Keep in mind, I'm 100% black. No question about it. I give her a WTF look. She then looks at me with the most shocked look on her face and says, "Oh shit, I forgot that you're black. I didn't mean it like that. I have black friends, I swear." I just walked away. I guess it was my karma for talking about people behind their back. Story 16. Not me, but I was there for it. After a family wedding, my dad and some of his cousins he hadn't seen in years were at my parents' home drinking beers and catching up. As they were laughing about an old story from being kids, my dad asked one of the cousins how his little brother was doing, because they hadn't talked in a few years. The room got so dead silent instantaneously that we could tell something was very off. The cousin he asked about with the brother got choked up, and another cousin awkwardly told my dad that the brother had died the year prior. Turns out my entire family was aware and had all gone to the memorial and been notified. My grandma somehow failed to realize nobody had informed my parents, so it was literally only my family that had no clue. Nobody even really shared about it on social media, so it was just a complete shock to us. Story 17, I had a friend who was a musician, and we worked at a video store. He did it for health insurance, but otherwise he was successful to be able to earn a living wage through his craft. A guy from a group of friends ignored him one day on the job. For months he was wondering why. It would come up. He'd whine about it. And then it would be a while before he wondered again months later. The last time he wondered about why, I told him the truth from which I overheard. The friend thought he was a loser for working at the video store. I did it out of frustration because he was still bothered by it. He was absolutely heartbroken about it. None of us saw him for a week after that. We were all looking for him. Roommates found him dead in bed. Died of a heart attack, we believe, like his father. I wish I never told him. Story 18. My fiance and I work together, just in different parts of the company and building per hour requirements, though our respective teams cross paths frequently. Nobody but HR and 2 other people knows we're actually together though, because we keep our personal and professional lives very separate. We don't even interact at work beyond carpooling there and back. This one lady on my team apparently developed a little crush on him, and he is clueless about when women are flirting with him. He's neurodivergent. So for a long time he just thought she was being friendly. I didn't even catch on to it at first because I really don't pay much attention to what my coworkers do beyond work-related things, but I guess she kept finding reasons to hang out around him when our team's work was done and chatting him up. He eventually caught on and expressed his concern that she was coming on to him in private and was unsure of what to do, so I said I'd handle it. It wasn't long before I heard her giggling to a group of other coworkers and saying stuff like, "Yeah, I think he's totally down. I'm gonna go for it and ask him out after work." So I drifted over nonchalantly and was like, "Ooh, an office romance. Who's the guy?" And of course she told me it was my man. So I had to gently crush her dreams and say, Oh, I'm so sorry, girl, but he's engaged. To me. I felt kind of bad because she looked so mortified and crestfallen at the same time. Story 19. This was by accident, but one of the most uncomfortable moments I've ever experienced. I was dating a guy whose best friend, I'm going to call him Joe Blow, was engaged to a woman named Linda. One night, the guy I was dating was coming over to watch a movie, and cooked dinner and asked me if he could bring along Joe Blow, whose fiance was out of town. His actual real name was more of an unusual name, not a really common name, both first and last names. The evening went along fine until I learned the last name of the girl he was engaged to, and I knew her from years before when she married a guy named Joe Blow. Yep, same name. As they were leaving, I said to him, "It's so funny she's marrying you now when her ex-husband's name is also Joe Blow. It's funny, ha ha ha. I mean, it was shocking to me." He looked surprised and I asked, "Oh, you didn't know that?" I was a little embarrassed. He said, "I didn't even know she had been married before." The guy had a PhD in psychology to boot. He looked to his friend as if he wanted some verification, and his friend said, yeah man, she was married to Joe Blow for about 5 years. They've been divorced for about a year." It was a terribly awkward moment for all three of us, and I really wish I hadn't said anything, but what the hell. Story 20. There was this regular guy at the bar, middle-aged guy, very conservative, blue-collar, Blue Lives Matter type guy. He said some wild things sometimes and loved sharing his opinion often. Most people would call him out or just laugh him off. One day he was talking about how terrible TikTok was. He started talking about how TikTok is nothing but young girls dancing provocatively and how disgusting he thought it was. Everyone kind of just nodded along and said variations of, "Yeah, that's crazy, man." A little later he left and everyone in the bar just collectively looked at each other kind of stunned. It doesn't fit the prompt technically because nobody had the heart to tell him how algorithms worked, but it's a wild example of somebody inadvertently revealing themselves too much.